I've always been the type of person who prefers driving at night. There's something about the empty roads, the quiet hum of my engine, and the occasional flicker of streetlights that makes me feel at peace. That night, though, God, that night, I should have just stayed home. I was doing my usual late-night shift for a rideshare company. Business was slow, but I didn't mind. Around 2:30 a.m., I got a request from a location that made me hesitate, a gas station at the very edge of town. One of those places that never really closes but always looks abandoned anyway. Something about it put me on edge, but I took the request. Money's money. As I pulled up, I spotted the guy immediately. He was standing under the dim glow of the overhead light, wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, and he wasn't pacing or looking at his phone like most people do when they're waiting. He was just standing there. I considered canceling, but before I could, he turned his head slowly toward me, like he already knew I was debating it. I don't know how, but even in the darkness, I felt his eyes on me. I unlocked the doors. He slid into the back seat without a word, the scent of sweat and something metallic filling my car. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to ignore the feeling of unease creeping up my spine. "Long night?" I asked, just to break the silence. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he let out this quiet, breathy chuckle. Then, in a voice so low I almost thought I imagined it, he said, "You could say that." Something about the way he spoke made my grip tighten on the wheel. I glanced at the GPS. The ride wasn't long, just 10 minutes to an address I didn't recognize. As we drove, the silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I tried not to check the rearview mirror too often, but every time I did, I saw him just sitting there, motionless, watching. Then he spoke again. "You ever pick up someone you shouldn't have?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I laughed nervously. "I hope not." He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. "Yeah," he muttered after a moment. "That's what I used to think, too." I forced my eyes to stay on the road, my pulse picking up. "You drive a lot at night, huh?" he asked. "Ain't it funny how much trust people put in a stranger sitting right behind them?" I felt a cold sweat break out along my neck. I didn't answer. I just wanted the ride to be over. And then, his voice changed. It wasn't casual anymore. It was quiet, strained, almost sad. "You ever wonder," he said, "if you're the last person someone ever talks to?" I felt like my throat had closed up. The GPS said we were 2 minutes away. He sighed, almost like he was reminiscing. "You're lucky, you know," he murmured. "Most people never see it coming." The words sent a chill through me. I reached for my phone, pretending to check the GPS, but really just wanting some excuse to do something, anything, other than sit there in silence. I nearly jumped when I saw flashing blue and red lights ahead. A police car. It was parked on the side of the road, engine off, just sitting there. The guy in my backseat went quiet. For a split second, I considered flagging the officer down, just pulling over and ending whatever this was. But before I could, my passenger spoke again. "Keep driving." It wasn't a request. It was an order. I swallowed hard. We were almost at his destination. Just one more turn. The police car remained still. I turned. His stop was an old house, its windows dark, the driveway cracked and empty. He shifted in his seat, finally moving for the first time since the ride began. "Guess this is me," he muttered. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. He reached for the door handle, but then paused. "Thanks for the ride," he said, his voice different now, softer. "I hope you make it home safe." I nodded stiffly, watching as he stepped out into the night. He walked toward the house, but never went inside. Just stood there, staring at me. I peeled out of the driveway so fast my tires squealed against the pavement. I didn't pick up another ride that night. The next morning, I checked the news. A man had been found dead near an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. His throat had been slit. The house was the same one I had dropped my passenger off at. I didn't call the police. I didn't report anything. But I started driving day shifts after that. And I never pick up riders from gas stations anymore. Story 2. I used to love the woods. I grew up in a rural town, surrounded by thick forests that stretched for miles in every direction. My parents' house was at the very edge of the tree line, and as a kid, I spent countless afternoons wandering the trails, climbing trees, and pretending the woods were my own little kingdom. That all changed when I moved into the cabin. It was supposed to be an escape, a fresh start. After years of city life, I was exhausted. The constant noise, the pressure, the suffocating crowds. I needed to get away from it all. When I found the listing for the cabin, it felt like fate. A secluded little place deep in the mountains, far from anyone or anything. Just me, the trees, and peace. Or so I thought. The first few days were perfect. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the porch, listening to birdsong instead of honking horns. I'd take long walks in the woods, breathing in the crisp mountain air, finally feeling like I could think again. The cabin itself was small but sturdy, built decades ago but well-maintained. The previous owner had left behind a few old books, some worn furniture, and a warning that the nearest town was an hour's drive away, so I should always keep my pantry stocked. I didn't mind. The solitude was exactly what I wanted. Then, on the fourth night, I heard the knocking. It was almost midnight, and I had been sitting by the fireplace, reading. The sound was soft at first, a rhythmic tap-tap-tap against the wooden door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. No neighbors, no hikers, no passing cars. Just me. The knocking continued. Slow, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. I crept toward the door, heart pounding, and peeked through the small window. There was no one there. I waited, straining my ears for any sound. Nothing. After a few minutes, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Maybe a tree branch had fallen, or some animal had brushed against the door. I locked up tight, double-checked the windows, and went to bed. The next night, it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. A little louder this time. I didn't go to the door. Instead, I sat in the dark, gripping a kitchen knife, my mind racing. Who the hell was out there? And why weren't they saying anything? I barely slept. By the third night, I was exhausted. I stayed up, waiting. When the knocking came, I grabbed a flashlight and yanked open the door. Nothing. No footprints in the dirt. No rustling in the trees. Just silence. I was starting to lose my mind. Then, on the fifth night, I heard something different. A whisper, right outside my bedroom window. Let me in. I shot up in bed, my skin crawling. The voice was low, almost pleading. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Please, it whispered. I'm so cold. I wanted to scream. Instead, I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. No signal. Of course. The whisper came again. Open the door. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to move. I grabbed the shotgun I kept by my bed, loaded it with shaking hands, and crept toward the window. The glass was fogged over, but I could make out a shape standing just outside. Tall, motionless, too tall. My breath hitched. Whatever it was looming over the window frame, its head almost brushing the eaves of the cabin. My stomach twisted. I didn't open the door. I didn't sleep. By morning, it was gone. I packed my things and left that day. I didn't even bother locking up behind me. Now, back in the city, I can't stop thinking about that whisper, that knocking, that impossible height. Sometimes, when I lie awake at night, I swear I hear it again. Tap, tap, tap. Let me in. Story 3. It started with a phone call. I was driving home late one night. The roads empty except for the occasional streetlight casting its eerie glow. The air was thick with fog, the kind that swallowed sound and made everything feel just a little too quiet. My music was playing softly, some old playlist I had shuffled on repeat, but I wasn't really listening. Then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I don't usually answer those, but something about the way it rang, shrill, insistent, made my stomach tighten. Without really thinking, I tapped the screen. Hello? For a moment, there was silence. Then, a voice. Are you alone? I nearly swerved off the road. The voice was low, distorted, like a bad radio signal. My throat went dry. Who is this? I demanded, glancing at my rearview mirror as if I expected someone to be sitting in my back seat. The voice didn't answer my question. Don't go home. My grip on the wheel tightened. What? The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my pulse hammering. I tried calling the number back, but it didn't even ring. Just an automated message. This number is not in service. A prank, I told myself. A stupid prank. But my gut told me otherwise. I should have listened. I got home just before midnight. My apartment building was quiet, the parking lot nearly empty. I locked my car, took the stairs 2 at a time, and let myself inside. Everything was normal. My couch, my kitchen, the half-empty water bottle I had left on the counter that morning. I exhaled, shaking my head at how ridiculous I had been. Then, as I set my keys down, I noticed something. The closet door. It was open, just a crack, a thin sliver of darkness peeking out from the hallway. I froze. I always shut that door before I leave. Always. A chill crawled up my spine. I tried to think rationally. Maybe I hadn't closed it all the way. Maybe a draft had nudged it open. But my apartment didn't have drafts. I stepped forward, heart pounding. Slowly, I reached for the handle, ready to slam it shut. Then I heard it. A breath. Coming from inside the closet. My stomach dropped. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But my body wouldn't move. I felt like I was sinking, my limbs sluggish, my breath shallow. Then, my phone rang. The sound shattered the silence, making me jump so hard I nearly screamed. With shaking hands, I grabbed it. My eyes locked on the crack in the closet door. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Don't turn around. I gasped, my body locking up. The voice was right behind me. I spun, nearly dropping my phone. Nothing. The apartment was empty, but I felt it. Something was wrong. I backed away from the closet, grabbed my keys, and ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, locking the doors, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. My phone buzzed again. A message. Just 2 words. Check your closet. I didn't go back inside. I drove. I didn't know where. I just kept driving, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Eventually, I ended up in a parking lot miles away, the neon glow of a gas station sign flickering overhead. I stayed there until morning. When I finally worked up the nerve to return, I brought a friend with me. He laughed at how paranoid I was, until he opened the closet. There was a chair inside, a wooden chair, facing the door. Neither of us had put it there. I moved out that same day, but sometimes, late at night, my phone still rings, and I never answer. Story 4. I should have never taken that shortcut. I had been driving for hours, trying to make it home before midnight. The highway was straight and empty. My only company the faint glow of my dashboard and the occasional sign telling me how many miles I had left to go. I was exhausted, my eyelids heavy, my thoughts sluggish. That's when I saw the sign. A small, battered green road sign at the edge of an exit ramp. Old Creek Road, 10 miles shorter. I had never heard of Old Creek Road, but 10 miles shorter meant at least 15 minutes off my drive. It was late, I was tired, and the sooner I got home, the better. So, I took the exit. At first, it seemed like any other back road. Narrow, winding, cutting through dense trees that loomed over the pavement like silent sentinels. My headlights barely cut through the darkness, the fog thick and clinging to the ground like something alive. After a few miles, my phone lost service. No bars. I tried not to think about it. The road twisted, dipped, then climbed again. The asphalt cracked and uneven. I turned my high beams on, scanning the trees. No houses, no streetlights, just the road and the dark. Then, my headlights caught something up ahead. A figure, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes. The figure didn't move. It was a woman. She was barefoot, her dress tattered and hanging off her frame like it didn't belong to her. Her hair was long and matted, hanging in front of her face. She stood completely still, her arms limp at her sides. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. I should have backed up, should have turned around right then and there. Instead, I rolled down my window just a crack. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't answer. I leaned forward slightly, my hands gripping the steering wheel. "Do you need help?" Then, in a slow, unnatural movement, she tilted her head. The way she did it, It wasn't normal, like something trying to mimic a human but getting it wrong. My skin crawled. I reached for my phone out of instinct, but remembered I had no service. Then the woman moved. Not toward me. She dropped to her knees. I gasped, my breath hitching in my throat. She was kneeling now, head still tilted, hands resting in her lap, like she was waiting for something. I put the car in reverse. The moment I did, she lifted her arms, palms up, like she was offering something to me. I didn't stay to find out what. I pressed my foot to the gas and tore backward, my tires screeching against the cracked asphalt. I kept my eyes on her in the rearview mirror. She hadn't moved, still kneeling, still holding out her hands. Then, her head snapped toward me, like she had been looking away the whole time, like she had only just now noticed me leaving. Her mouth opened wide, too wide. I didn't see what happened next because I was gone. I drove faster than I ever had in my life, the trees blurring past, the road twisting beneath my tires. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, I saw another sign. Highway 17 to 1 mile. I nearly cried. When I finally reached the highway, I didn't stop. I merged back onto the familiar, well-lit road and kept driving until I saw the glow of the city in the distance. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was starting to rise. I didn't sleep that night, didn't tell anyone, but a few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for Old Creek Road. It didn't exist. At least, not on any map. I don't know where I went that night. I don't want to know. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see her, kneeling, waiting, and offering something I never want to see. Story 5. The first time I saw the man, he was standing in my backyard. It was late, past 2 a.m., and I had been sitting in my living room, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. The only light came from the dim glow of the screen, and the rest of my house was silent. That's when I heard the tap. Soft, barely noticeable. I thought I had imagined it at first, but then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the glass door leading to my backyard. A slow, creeping unease settled into my stomach as I turned my head. And that's when I saw him. A man, standing completely still just beyond the glass. He was tall, too tall, and dressed in dark clothing that seemed to blend into the night. His face was obscured by shadows, but I could see just enough to know that he was looking at me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. We just stared at each other. Then, he took a step forward. I reacted instantly, scrambling to my feet and grabbing the nearest thing I could find. A heavy lamp from the end table. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The man didn't respond, didn't move, didn't blink. Then he smiled. I felt my blood turn to ice. It wasn't a normal smile. His lips stretched too wide, his teeth too white, too straight, like they weren't real, like they had been placed there. My legs locked in place, my mind screaming at me to run, but I was frozen. Then, he lifted his hand and pressed his palm against the glass. That was the moment I snapped out of it. I bolted, running straight for my bedroom and locking the door behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think straight. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I dialed 911. But there was no service. I tried again, and again. Nothing. Then, outside my bedroom window, tap, tap, tap. I choked on a scream. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to look, but I did. And there he was, standing outside my second-floor window, smiling. I don't remember much after that. I think I passed out. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the curtains, and everything was silent. My phone had service again. I called the police immediately. They searched the property, found nothing. No footprints in the grass. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. But I know what I saw. And now, every night, as soon as the sun sets, I lock every door, every window. I keep the curtains shut tight, because I know he's still out there, waiting. And sooner or later, he's going to knock again.